And welcome back to my vlog. This is the second half of Chapter 1, Abundance, Scarcity, of Part 1, Sophisms of Protection, Sophisms of the Protectionists by the late M. Frederick Bastiat. Are we physicians? We cannot but see that certain physical ameliorations, such as the improved climate of the country, the development of certain moral virtues, the progress of knowledge pushed to the extent of enabling each individual to take care of his own health, the discovery of certain simple remedies easily applied would be so many fatal blows to our profession. As physicians, then, our secret desires are antisocial. I must not be understood to imply that physicians allow themselves to form such desires. I am happy to believe that they would hail with joy a universal panacea. But in such a sentiment it is the man, the Christian, who manifests himself, and who, by a praiseworthy abnegation of self, takes that point of view of the question which belongs to the consumer. As a physician exercising his profession and gaining from this profession his standing in society, his comforts, even the means of existence of his family, it is impossible but that his desires, or if you please so to word it, his interests, should be antisocial. Are we manufacturers of cotton goods? We desire to sell them at the price most advantageous to ourselves. We would willingly consent to the suppression of all rival manufactories, and if we dare not publicly express this desire or pursue the complete realization of it with some success, we do so, at least to a certain extent, by indirect means. As, for example, the exclusion of foreign goods in order to diminish the quantity offered, and to produce thus, by forcible means and for our own profits, a scarcity of clothing. We might thus pass in review every business and every profession, and should always find that the producers, in their character of producers, have invariably antisocial interests. The shopkeeper, says Montaigne, succeeds in his business through the extravagance of youth, the laborer by the high price of grain, the architect by the decay of houses, officers of justice by lawsuits and quarrels. The standing and occupation even of ministers of religion are drawn from our death and our vices. No physician takes pleasure in the health even of his friends, no soldier in the peace of his country, and so on with all. If then the secret desires of each producer were realized, the world would rapidly retrograde towards barbarism. The sail would proscribe steam, the oar would proscribe the sail, only in its turn to give way to wagons, the wagon to the mule, and the mule to the foot peddler. Wool would exclude cotton, cotton would exclude wool. And thus on until the scarcity and want of everything would cause man himself to disappear from the face of the globe. If we now go on to consider the immediate interest of the consumer, we shall find it in perfect harmony with the public interest and with the well-being of humanity. When the buyer presents himself in the market, he desires to find it abundantly furnished. He sees with pleasure propitious seasons for harvesting, wonderful inventions, putting within his reach the largest possible quantity of produce, time and labor saved, distances effaced, the spirit of peace and justice diminishing the weight of taxes, every barrier to improvement cast down, and in all this his interest runs parallel with an enlightened public interest. He may push his secret desires to an absurd and chimerical height, but never can they cease to be humanizing in their tendency. He may desire that food and clothing, house and hearth, instruction and morality, security and peace, strength and health, should come to us without limit and without labor or effort on our part, as the water of the stream, the air which we breathe, and the sunbeams in which we bask. But never could the realization of his most extravagant wishes run counter to the good of society. It may be said, perhaps, that were these desires granted, the labor of the producer constantly checked would end by being entirely arrested for want of support. But why? Because in this extreme supposition, every imaginable need and desire would be completely satisfied. Man, like the all-powerful, would create by the single act of his will. Now, in such an hypothesis, could laborious production be regretted? Imagine a legislative assembly composed of producers, of whom each member should cause to pass into a law his secret desire as a producer. The code which would emanate from such an assembly could be nothing but systematized monopoly, the scarcity theory put into practice. In the same manner, an assembly in which each member should consult only his immediate interest of consumer would aim at the systematizing of free trade. The suppression of every restrictive measure, the destruction of artificial barriers, in a word, would realize the theory of abundance. It follows, then, that to consult exclusively the immediate interest of the producer is to consult an antisocial interest. To take exclusively for basis the interest of the consumer is to take for basis the general interest. Let me be permitted to insist once more upon this point of view, though at the risk of repetition. A radical antagonism exists between the seller and the buyer. The former wishes the article offered to be scarce, supply small, and at a high price. The latter wishes it abundant, supply large, and at a low price. The laws, which should at least remain neutral, take part for the seller against the buyer, for the producer against the consumer, for high against low prices, for scarcity against abundance. They act, if not intentionally, at least logically, upon the principle that a nation is rich in proportion as it is in want of everything. For, say they, it is necessary to favor the producer by securing him a profitable disposal of his goods. To effect this, their price must be raised. To raise the price, the supply must be diminished, and to diminish the supply is to create scarcity. Let us suppose that at this moment, with these laws in full action, a complete inventory should be made, not by value, but by weight, measure, and quantity, of all articles now in France calculated to supply the necessities and pleasures of its inhabitants, as grain, meat, woolen and cotton goods, fuel, etc. Let us suppose again that tomorrow every barrier to the introduction of foreign goods should be removed. Then, to judge of the effect of such a reform, let a new inventory be made 3 months hence. Is it not certain that at the time of the second inventory, the quantity of grain, cattle, goods, iron, coal, sugar, etc. will be greater than at the first? So true is this that the sole object of our protective tariffs is to prevent such articles from reaching us, to diminish the supply, to prevent low prices, or, which is the same thing, the abundance of goods. Now I ask, are the people under the action of these laws better fed because there is less bread, less meat, and less sugar in the country? Are they better dressed because there are fewer goods? Better warmed because there is less coal? Or do they prosper better in their labor because iron, copper, tools, and machinery are scarce? But it is answered, if we are inundated with foreign goods and produce, our coin will leave the country. Well, and what means that? Man is not fed with coin. He does not dress in gold nor warm himself with silver. What difference does it make whether there be more or less coin in the country, provided there be more bread in the cupboard, more meat in the larder, more clothing in the press, and more wood in the cellar? To restrictive laws I offer this dilemma. Either you allow that you produce scarcity, or you do not allow it. If you allow it, you confess at once that your end is to injure the people as much as possible. If you do not allow it, then you deny your power to diminish the supply, to raise the price, and consequently you deny having favored the producer. You are either injurious or inefficient. You can never be useful. It's the end of chapter 1. More tomorrow. Make it a great day, and bye for now.